You know that nagging, persistent pain on the pinky side of your wrist? It's a surprisingly common problem, but for ages, figuring out what's really going on in there has been a huge medical mystery. Well, today, we're going to crack open that black box. Seriously, millions of people deal with this. It can be a dull ache, or it can be a sharp, awful pain that flares up when you try to grip something, turn a doorknob, or even just push yourself up from a chair. And here's why it's so tough to solve. The wrist isn't simple. I mean, it's an incredibly complex piece of machinery. So for doctors, pinpointing the exact cause is a massive challenge. It's kind of like trying to find one single faulty wire in a giant tangled up circuit board. Okay, so how do we start untangling this thing? Well, our investigation begins by looking inside what surgeons literally call the wrist's black box. This quote right here, it's straight from the research we're looking at today, and it just nails the problem. And don't get thrown by that word idiopathology. It's a mouthful, right? It's just a fancy way of saying figuring out what the heck is causing this. And for this kind of wrist pain, yeah, that has been a huge puzzle for a long time. Now, while a bunch of things can cause this pain, when doctors, or detectives in this case, show up to the crime scene, they almost always find two main suspects. First up, we've got ulnar impaction syndrome. We'll just call it UIS. And suspect number 2 is an injury to, get this, the triangular fibrocartilage complex. Yeah, let's just stick with TFCC. And the real kicker? These two are almost always found together. All right, let's dig into our first suspect, ulnar impaction syndrome. And honestly, the name itself kind of gives the whole game away. So you've got two bones in your forearm, right? The ulna is the one on your pinky side. In UIS, that bone is just a tiny bit too long compared to the other one, the radius. Imagine a door that's just a little too tall for the door frame. Every single time you close it, scrape, it grinds against the floor. Well, that's pretty much exactly what's happening inside your wrist every time you move it. And check this out. You don't even need to be a radiologist to spot the evidence on this X-ray. See where those arrows are pointing? Look how that ulna bone is just jamming right into the little bones of the wrist. That constant grinding, that scraping, it does real damage. You can actually see the bone getting thicker and brighter right there as a sign of stress. Sometimes little cysts even pop up from it all. Ouch. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. It's how a tiny, tiny difference in length has this massive effect. Look at this chart. In a normal wrist, that side takes about 18% of the load. Okay, but get this. If the ulna is just 2.5 millimeters too long, we're talking less than the thickness of 2 dimes. That load skyrockets to 42%. That completely rewrites the rules of physics for your wrist. Okay, on to suspect number 2. That's the triangular fibrocartilage complex. And yeah, like I said, we're just going to call it the TFCC. Much easier. So if the impaction is our grinding door, think of the TFCC as this tiny, super tough, shock-absorbing hammock. It's stretched right across the end of your ulna, and it basically cradles your wrist bones. It keeps everything stable when you twist your arm, and it acts as a cushion to absorb force. I mean, it is an absolutely crucial piece of hardware. And this is what happens when that hammock gives out. Over on the left, that MRI, see that bright white line the arrow's pointing to? That's the tear. And then on the right, wow, that's a view from a tiny camera inside the wrist, and you can see the tissue is literally frayed and torn up. When this structure is compromised, you lose all that crucial stability and all that cushioning. It's a huge problem. Okay, so we have our two suspects, the impaction and the tear, and they're always found together at the scene of the crime. For years, everybody in the medical world had a pretty simple story about how they were related. But what if they had the story completely backwards? And this, right here, is the heart of the mystery. It's a total chicken and egg problem. What really comes first? Does the long bone slowly grind away and cause the tear? Or does the tear happen first and then somehow that leads to the bone problem? You know, the answer to that question changes everything about how you fix it. So the old theory, the one everyone believed for ages, was simple. You've got a long ulna, it constantly grinds on the TFCC, and over many years, it just wears a hole right through it. Cause and effect. Simple. But this new theory flips the whole thing on its head. It suggests a tear in the TFCC happens first, maybe from a fall when you were a kid. That creates an unstable, wobbly wrist.
And then, over years, maybe even decades, the wrist changes and adapts, trying to stabilize itself. And that adaptation leads to the signs we see as impaction.
And this graph right here, this is the smoking gun. Let me walk you through it. The red line represents that wrist instability right after an injury. See how it's high when patients are younger? But look what happens as people get older. The instability actually seems to go down. At the exact same time, the blue line, which represents the signs of bone impaction, goes up. So here's the wild idea. What if the body is creating the impaction on purpose? It's trying to build a bony block to stop the wobble from that old injury. The body's own attempt to heal itself ends up causing a whole new problem. So this just reframes the whole mystery, right? We may have been looking at the crime scene backwards this entire time. The impaction isn't the villain that starts the fight. It might just be the body's clumsy, decades-long attempt to patch up an old wound. Now, this isn't just some fascinating academic debate. This new perspective completely changes the game for treatment. Because if you only fix the problem you think is the cause, you could be missing the real culprit entirely.
So the modern solution is a 1-2 punch. First, you have to deal with the immediate problem, the effect, that painful grinding. That means shortening the ulna bone. But then, and this is absolutely crucial, you have to go back and fix the original cause, that torn TFCC that made the wrist unstable in the first place.
And here's what that first punch looks like. On the left is the before X-ray with that long ulna. And on the right, the after. Surgeons perform a procedure called an ulnar shortening osteotomy. Basically, they remove a tiny sliver of bone and reattach it with a plate and screws. And boom. You can immediately see the new space it creates in the joint, relieving all that painful pressure. But that's only half the battle. This image shows the second, critical part of the fix. I mean, look at this. Using tiny cameras and instruments, a surgeon is working inside the wrist, meticulously stitching that torn hammock, the TFCC, back together. This is what restores the original stability that was lost years and years ago. It's just incredible. And that is how you crack this case, by addressing both the symptom, the impaction, and the root cause, the tear, at the same time. You're not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. You are actually solving the mystery of the black box and giving patients the best possible shot at a pain-free, stable wrist for good. It really makes you think, doesn't it? This whole story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the key to solving a complex puzzle is just being willing to turn it completely upside down and question what you think you know. What we see as the cause might just be a long-forgotten effect. It just leaves you wondering, how many other medical black boxes out there are waiting to be solved if only we start looking at them a little bit differently?